Sweet the whispers in your ear whenever Ember wanders near.
All right. So let's take a look and see what this viral prison creator is all about and why Rich says they got it completely wrong.
YouTube felons. No, I'm not talking about YouTubers that committed a crime and then went to prison. I'm talking about the reverse. People who committed crimes, went to prison for a lengthy time, and then switched to YouTube and TikTok and other social media platforms to tell their story on the other side of the law and their unique perspective from that perspective. And sometimes that perspective is wrong. Like when previous bank fraudster Matthew Cox said this about police interviews.
There's a technique detectives do. So if you have a pre-prepared story, then it's very hard to break someone from telling that story. A normal person will go, what was that? These suspects will go, so I called her and you can check her phone, and a normal person would get, the fuck was that, bro?
And we're gonna talk about that today. But first, a word from this video's sponsor.
I think I need more context on what he just said.
And modify your own guns. And if you're looking for a way to take your hobby to the next level, Sonoran Desert Institute can help. The online programs at SDI cover armorer courses, gunsmithing, ballistics, woodworking, shooting sports management, and more. Plus, tools and materials are shipped to your door for hands-on
out
practice.
of context, that
it's never
clip
been a
made
better
no
time to get an
sense
education
whatsoever.
that you can actually use on the job.
Out of context, that clip made absolutely no sense. Is
Now,
this a
Matthew
variation
Cox
on
isn't
internet
the only
sleuths? I don't
person
know.
on YouTube and Instagram to be a convicted felon and then come back over onto social media and talk about their life behind bars and how they've changed it around. You can find dozens and dozens of accounts. In fact, I'm friends with one of them, JD DeLay. He got me a baby stroller for my kid. We call it the future felon farrier. Triple F. Because either my kid's gonna be a felon or he's not gonna be caught. There's really no saving him. His path is predetermined. But our focus today is Matthew Cox. And Matthew Cox has numerous videos, a large following, and his own podcast where he talks about his 13 years incarcerated for numerous bank frauds, interviews police officers, federal agents, other criminals, and different aspects of crime, because there's not just bank fraud, gang violence, robberies, house break-ins, those bullshit AI text messages that you get that says, hey, your electric bill is overdue, we're gonna turn it off tomorrow unless you text us. Don't ever answer those.
No.
Bullshit.
God,
when
no.
has your utility company ever done anything in the next 24 hours? Never. I'll give you that answer. Now, it's during one of these podcast episodes or interviews with another individual that Matthew says something that made me do a double take.
There's a technique detectives do. So if you have a pre-prepared story, then it's very hard to break someone from telling that story. So detectives will do, they call it the nanny boo-boo, where they're like, right, so then what happened? Okay. And the guy's like, I haven't seen her since such and such, and they'll sit there and they'll go, okay. That's the nanny boo-boo. Just real quick, they go, all right, so what happened then? And a normal person will go, what was that? These suspects will go, so I called her and you can check her phone, and a normal person would get, the fuck was that, bro? They don't, because they have a certain story they're trying to tell you. I'm trying to get you to believe this, so I'm gonna tell you my story. I've already thought about it 10 times. I have a perfect story. I don't wanna get off track.
To quote Drake, where do I even begin? Where?
Yeah, like, okay, I can say, that's not a fucking technique. Where a cop will sit back and do the nanny boo boo thing with his or her hands. Where the fuck is he coming up with this? That's not a thing. Cause I'm trying to figure out where he got this from. Cause like, okay, the typical detective probably, if they're doing like if a criminal is like has a pre-planned story that they're going to tell, the way a detective will address that is they will poke holes in it. Like any detective that goes into an interview, chances are that detective probably knows a hell of a lot more than you think he knows. No detective is going to go into an interview with a suspect completely blind. They're going to have a whole bunch of facts. Now, they may not have all the answers, but they're going to have a whole bunch of facts that they have already, gathered, and, facts and evidence that they have already gathered together prior to putting you into that room, especially if you got put into a room in handcuffs because they actually had to track you down, which means either they were hunting for you or they had a word for you. So they already have most of the answers already before you even enter into that room. And if you go in there with a pre-prepared story, a detective's simply just going to start poking the holes all over that fucking story and just basically deflate it as you tell it. Not go nanny nanny boo boo and like try and like throw you off your game. The way a detective will throw you off your game is literally like you're telling your story and then the detective goes, okay, well then what about this? Which is completely contrary to the preconceived story. And then the colonel's gonna be like, fuck, I've got to figure out another lie.
Why really even start? Something like that. It's a Drake song. All right, we're going to talk about a couple things here. Obviously, we're going to talk about the nanny nanny boo boo. We're also going to talk about interview processes and when somebody has a pre-rehearsed story. As Matthew says, you don't want to break from that story. They want to stay on that story. That is true. So we'll talk about the nanny nanny boo boo story and how I break people from their predetermined rehearsed stories. First off, the nanny nanny boo boo. Absolutely not. That never happens. I've never heard of it in my entire life. Not only that, I have never ever in my entire career heard of any other detective saying, what I like to do is throw somebody off balance with something when they're giving me a rehearsed story. No nanny boo boo, no dropping a cup of coffee, no standing up and going, I have to go to the bathroom. Nothing jarring or whatever. You want to know what we do? I'll tell you what we do. We let you tell us the story. Why?
Because it's digging their own hole. That's why. As I said, detectives, when they go into interview a suspect, they are going in with information. They do not go in blind. They go in prepared. So you let the suspect tell the entire story, and then you go, poke, 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 and you start poking all kinds of holes in the story. This doesn't make sense. This doesn't make sense. What about this? What about this? How could you have been doing this when this was happening? And they've already dug themselves into the pre-prepared story, and they have no fucking clue where to go from there because they're already in a hole. And now you basically just started filling it in with water with facts that you already know, and now they're like, fuck. How the hell do I deviate from this?
Well, even if it is a load of bullshit, which I'm sure that we'll be able to figure out later on during the interview process, but let's say that we sit down, you and me, across from one another, and you've rehearsed a story over and over again, and you're going to tell it to me. You know what I'm not going to do? I'm not going to interrupt you.
Sung Soo, never interrupt an opponent when they're making a mistake. It is basic Sung Soo. You just, if they're going to make a mistake to a pre-told story and bury themselves, let them, because that's all going on the record. Let them make their mistakes when you've got the information to contradict it.
Because you're not stupid.
I'm going to let you keep talking, because that's the point of a police interview. I don't interrupt you. You tell me everything that you possibly can, and I ask you questions about that when you're done. And if I ask you a question, what I don't want to do is interrupt you while you're talking. Why?
Because that's stupid.
Because if it's a lie or if it's the truth, eventually I'm going to find out. Because just like a normal question, like you coming home late from the bar with a whole bunch of titty glitter on your chest, your wife is going to ask you, well, where did you go? And you're going to give her rehearsed story. And then you know what she's going to do? Ask more questions. You went out to the bar. What bar's got titty glitter on it?
Those are the best kind.
Steve's bar sells titty glitter packets. Oh, so Steve's bar sells titty glitter. Awesome. Let me call up Steve's Glitter Titter Factory bar and see if that's a real thing. Uh-oh. Wah, 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 wah. You've just been caught in a lie. Now, I'm not saying it's that easy as that conversation between a husband and a wife coming home with some booby glitter on his chest from the strip club, right? It's a little more difficult than that. You have to listen, and a part of the listening process and interview process, especially when they're giving you a BS story, is listening. Did I just say listening twice?
Yes.
It's that important. Because here's the thing with a well-rehearsed story. It's still a lie!
Tell her the truth.
But I digress. Let's stick to the nanny boo-boo thing. I'm kind of mixing the two together. I guess it was bound to happen. You know why? Because it's a natural flow of a story. Oh my God, did I just accidentally prove my own point? Yes! Every story you tell is going to have a different iteration each time you tell it, because you're going to remember different things. You're going to get sidetracked on things you want to say. And the only way to keep things...
And another thing is like when criminals tell a lie and they do a pre-prepared story and they tell a lie, very often they don't retain it. Like with a lot of criminals, when they get this pre-prepared story, they're like razzed up and they're ready to go. They're ready to tell the story. They get sat down in an interview room. They tell their story. They just like vomit out this story. Very often criminals, once they've completed their story, it goes right out of their head. For the average criminal, like this is not TV. Like TV and movies, the criminals are always so smart. They remember exactly what they said, and they've figured out all of the, they're thinking 3 steps ahead. TV loves to say the criminal is thinking 3 steps ahead of the cops, and they know how to plan out a story and shit like that. The average criminal, which is your average street criminal, doesn't do that. The average street criminal isn't smart. They really aren't. They will, and yeah, it's essentially it's like a fucking what is it for Instagram where you like a self-destructing DM. When a criminal tells a pre-made story, it's basically the same thing as a self-destructing DM from Instagram. They tell their story, they vomit up that story, and then that story has left their mind. They will not remember all of the details. And even if they do remember some of what the story that they told, they will not remember the details of the story that they told. So what happens is the cop's talking to him, blah, blah, blah. He tells the story, the cop, they do some back and forth, they say, good, take a break. You want to go get some coffee? You want me to get you some coffee? I'm going to go get some coffee. Or you want some water? Cop leaves, gives him like 5-10 minutes to just sit there, comes back with like coffee or something, starts the interview process back up again, goes, okay, now let's go back to this story that you told me. So what about this? And they'll start pointing out, they'll start asking for details because unlike the criminal, the cops have written this down.
She's so cute.
You'll notice that most detectives, whenever you watch like true crime dramas or something, most detectives, when they go into an interview room with suspect, they usually have a pad of paper, and usually there is video camera footage or video camera recording. So what they'll do is they'll leave the suspect alone for like 10 minutes, and go fuck off and use the bathroom, get some water, get the suspect a coffee, maybe get the suspect a sandwich. You hungry? I'll get you a sandwich. Then they'll come back in and they'll go, okay, now going back to this thing, where was this at again? And then the suspect, typically speaking, will go, fuck, where did I tell him it was? Or the detective might come and go, okay, so you were at this place, and maybe deliberately give a different location that sounds similar to what the suspect had said where they were, and the suspect go, that's where it was. That's where it was. And it's like, that's a way to that's why you let them get their story out, because they're not going to remember the details that are important. I'm not talking about like nitpicking. I'm not talking about nuance. No, I'm not talking about like stupid nitpicky bullshit that would never like make for a case in court. I'm talking about like the stuff that like specific locations, like I am here. Okay. And then you go back in, like, okay, so you were here, and maybe they change it up and say, oh, they were at this location instead of this location, and the suspect may not remember the lie that they told, and they may go, oh yeah, I was at this location. Then they keep going on. Then they just have to go, now let me see it. You said you were here, but when you first said the story, you were actually saying that you were here. So where is it? Now you've caught them in a lie. Because again, they're not going to remember a lot of the details, because once they've unleashed once they've basically given the story kind of goes out of their head. They're not going to retain those details.
Coherent is to tell the truth.
I want the truth. You can't handle the truth.
Because the truth doesn't change. But nanny nana boo boo thing. In an interview, if the person across from me thinks that this is a joke, they don't want to talk to me. Would you talk to somebody who wasn't listening to you or taking you seriously, even if it was a lie? Well, especially if you're trying to get them to believe a lie, you want that person engaged in that conversation. You don't want them leaned back, making faces and smoking a cigarette and making jerk-off hand motions and rolling their eyes at you when you tell them the story, because what that's going to do is it's going to show my disinterest in your conversation. You're going to be insulted. I am a bad listener that doesn't give a shit. You wouldn't want to talk to me if I did that.
Not only that, by doing all that bullshit that Rich was just talking about, it also makes the suspect think that they don't believe you. And the whole purpose with letting the suspect tell their story and being locked in and engaged with them is so that the suspect does think that the police officer believes them or that they're actually hearing them. Because if they don't, then they're just gonna be like, why the fuck am I talking with you? Get me a lawyer. Like, you obviously are not, like, it's the whole thing. Well, obviously you're not going to believe a thing I say, so why should I talk to you? I don't want to talk to you no more. No, you as a police officer want the suspect to talk to you. Otherwise, because that's how you work a case. So if you're just like doing the nanny boo boo, you're rolling your eyes, you're clearly showing that you don't believe a fucking thing that the suspect is saying, the suspect is not going to keep talking to you and giving you more information or giving you more lies that you can then use against him to get to the facts of the case. And instead they'll just go, you know what, I don't want to talk to you, because then they can invoke their Fifth Amendment rights, or they can request a lawyer, because, well, clearly you're not going to believe where I say, so give me a lawyer. Things like that.
Nanny boo boo. Once again, an interview is a conversation between two people. Honesty is important in that conversation. Now, I may not say everything that I have behind my deck of cards, all the things I know and don't, but the conversation is still based on trust. John, I need to know the truth about this incident. Is that a lie? No, it's not. Might I know a lot of information that John's going to tell me already? Sure, but I'm still being honest with John. Yes. John, you had a relationship with a girl named Sarah, right? Yes, I did. Tell me about that relationship. Well, why do you want to tell me? Why? I'm currently gathering information about Sarah, and I need your help in order to confirm some of the information that I already have, and maybe some that I don't. By the way, in my head for this, Sarah got raped. So, which is kind of my expertise here. When I would interview people, I wouldn't say, hey, John, I'm interviewing you about the girl that you potentially raped. I would usually start off with honesty and say, listen, I'm investigating a young female named Sarah. Maybe I wouldn't start out with her name, maybe I would. And I'm just trying to determine the relationships that she's had with people in the area. Is that true? Yep. Is it a more broad and more digestible way of saying I'm trying to see if she was raped by somebody in the room, not me, John? So, no, we don't use nanny boo boo tricks, because the conversation that we're having with the person across the desk from us is supposed to be real, authentic, and honest.
Plus is stupid.
And sure, there are going to be moments where I say, John, I can't answer that question right now. And then we move forward. But what I don't want to do is start throwing in weird curveballs to throw you off your game when you're already talking to me. Now, could that have happened? Could some detective have told him or actually done it during an interview to somebody else? It's possible, but it's called a bad interview technique. And that is definitely not something that anybody should be practicing. Now, could a detective have some sort of quote-unquote trick that they use in order to get somebody to talk? Sure, that thing could be based on experience. Let's say it's a nanny boo-boo thing, all right, even though I know that those didn't happen, right? Just because we're here.
And Rich is an active detective with the Special Victims Unit of the Buffalo Police Department. His specialty is like crimes against children, sexual crimes, things of that nature. Yes, that is his specialty as a police detective.
Let's say it's a nanny boo-boo. A cop learns a nanny boo-boo trick, right? And he teaches it to other coppers. If there is a technique, trick, you might want to call it, in interviewing, it's usually specific to a specific scenario. Hey, if this person's lying about X, Y, and Z, and there's a bunch of other things, like are they talking, is it this certain crime that whatever works with the trick or technique, then you could try to apply that technique. But normally, the best technique in interviewing is listening. Listening and asking good questions based off of the statements that the person you're interviewing is giving you.
By the way, for those of you that came in late and like I'm confused about the nanny boo-boo technique, that some guy that used to be a criminal and now he's out, now he's doing like TikTok videos is saying that police officers, and he's like speaking writ large, will use a technique what that he's referring to as the nanny boo-boo technique, where they're interviewing a suspect in an interrogation room, will sit back, basically put their fingers in the ears and waggle their fingers like they're going nanny boo boo. They won't actually say nanny boo boo. But this guy is making the claim that they'll make that hand gesture briefly to try and like throw off the suspect that they're trying to interview for a crime, and versus explaining why that happens. Now, you know when a police officer might do a quote-unquote nanny boo-boo thing where they sit back and make the hand gesture to try and throw them off, or spill a cup of coffee to try and throw them off their game. You know when a cop might do that? Anyone want to take a guess when when a detective might actually use that quote-unquote technique to throw off a suspect? Anyone want to take a guess? On TV. That is something that a TV police detective would do. To basically go, oh, you're such a good interrogator that the suspect is telling you a lie and you're going to do something to make them jump and spook them, to make them throw them off their game. And, oh, you're such a skilled interrogator. You know about all these techniques. That's where he got it from. That's like, oh, the majority of the bullshit that you hear about law enforcement, like from this, like, felon that's claiming to know how police interrogation techniques work, they're getting it from Hollywood. They're getting it from like quote unquote true crime stuff, where they're getting it from, you know, police detective shows that has no existence in reality, and they're pretending like it is reality. He went into prison for being a scammer, and it sounds like he's doing scamming online to try and make a clout and make money by claiming he is an expert in how this happens. He's basically pretending like Hollywood is reality. That's what it is. That's what you see a lot of this is. We're like, oh, cops do this and cops do this. Like people say like, oh, yeah, cop would do this. Yeah, they got that from Hollywood. They got that from TV. They got that from film. And it doesn't actually exist in reality. It's kind of like it's kind of like how the CSI Effect, where there, supposedly jurors on a criminal case would find a defendant not guilty because it was taking the state crime lab like, I don't know, several months or up to a year to process like fingerprint evidence or DNA evidence or something. And the jury had seen CSI where they literally do it in a couple of hours and they have perfect fingerprint results back and they have perfect DNA back in like 24 hours when that never actually happens. Whereas fingerprint results is not always a 100% guarantee. There's like, oh, there is no like, it's a perfect match. He's the bad guy. Or we have your DNA. We did a swab and 24 hours later, we know this is your DNA, which is not reality. I don't know about years plural. It can't DNA tests typically are probably about a year unless it is an extremely high profile case and there's a rush put onto it. Then the state lab might like put a rush on it and get it back to you maybe like in a couple days or something. But typically it's like your average wait time is like a year. Cold cases can be years because of lack of evidence, and then new evidence has been gathered and sent to the lab, and blah 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 blah. But like, this is where I'm talking about, where like people are getting their people have this preconceived notion of how law enforcement works based on Hollywood. Hollywood has given such a piss poor concept of how police works and the speed at which police works. Like your average homicide case is not something that gets solved in like 24 hours or even 48 hours. Very often, homicide cases can take months or even years before they're finally able to narrow down a suspect and make an arrest. It's like that is very common. It's like a lot, unless you get lucky and you basically have a homicide and the suspect is right there on scene when it occurs and you're able to take the suspect into custody, you have information to that points to that suspect being the offender right off the bat, that you can take him into custody, do your interview, and suspect just gives it up. That is few and far between. Most often these cases like this, like robberies, homicides, rapes, all of these cases, they take a long time to investigate, and they typically they don't get closed within 24 or 48 hours like on TV. That's where Hollywood basically is kind of fucked over the public, because it was like what Rich was talking about with the social media detectives, how he hates the social media detectives because they're like, "Oh, we've watched CSI. We can solve this case." And they end up fucking the case up entirely. It's the same basic principle.
Can you imagine that?
Example. Well, actually, I'll give my example. We'll stick with John and Sarah, right? The pre-rehearsed story, right? The second half of this video that we're going to be discussing. How do you break somebody out of a pre-rehearsed story? It's really not that hard. You just ask questions. And eventually the pre-rehearsed story is going to start falling in on itself, or you'll notice the impossibilities, things that you can point out that are incapable of happening. Let's say that John sits down across from me and says, "Yes, I know Sarah. I picked her up in my car, I dropped her off home, and then I went straight home after that. That's it. No witnesses, no alibis, no nothing." "All right, John, what kind of car do you drive?" "I drive this." "What color is it?" "Oh, it's this." And what license plate number?" "It's this." Guess what I probably already know about John? I probably know what car he drives. Guess what else I've done? I've probably gotten a good idea of where, I know people are going to be upset with this, flock cameras. If you use flock appropriately, as in there's a and I'm trying to discover what car was driving from where and the location of that vehicle, then yeah, flock is a great tool. Just like every tool that we have, don't allow police to abuse it. I absolutely agree. That's my 2 cents on flock. So during this interview, you can bet that even though John says, "Oh yeah, I went right home afterwards," I might start asking him about different times. "All right, well, how long did it take you to get home from her house?" I already know where those 2 locations are. It should only take him 3 minutes. But guess what? It took him like 45 minutes because during that extra time, he was doing naughty things to Sarah against her will.
Got a rope.
Now, I can ask a whole bunch of other things. What clothing were you wearing? What shoes did you have? And if I've got somebody's statements, I can write up a warrant based on their statements and the possibility of you confirming some of the information that I already know is true. So in all honesty, I do not, good interviewers, do not want to stop somebody when they're giving me a BS story. We want them to tell us all of the BS story and exclude.
Okay, hang on. I address this. Took almost a year to take Carmelo Anthony to trial. That is not the same thing. That's not the same thing. Where the year that it took to get Carmelo Anthony to trial, they arrested him on site. They were able to facilitate the arrest on site. They were able to do the interview immediately. They were able to charge him and immediately after that incident. The trial itself, taking a year for the trial to start is common. There is motions up. There is pretrial hearings. There is, God, what's the word I'm looking for? There's preliminary hearings. There's motions for discovery. There are continuances. Like, this is all very common. So that doesn't have anything to do in regards to interviews like we're talking about here. That's just normal trial stuff. Your average high-profile case of homicide, high-profile rape, or high-profile aggravated battery, or a major like jewel heist or something. That, typically speaking, it's not months of red tape. It's literally just going through the process. It's preliminary hearings. It's various motions, like discovery motions, or continuance motions, or motions to exclude. Then there's also jury selection. That's another moment. So it's just that in no way is the same thing. It's literally just the court machine just chugging along as it does. It's a completely separate thing.
giving me a BS story. We want them to tell us all of the BS story in excruciating detail. Because guess what? There's
Oh, wait, hang on. To be suspicious by profile case suddenly goes to trial, tinfoil heads that he's getting railroaded. Not necessarily. If the defendant is demanding a speedy trial, then maybe that the case might suddenly go to trial. If the defendant is saying, we want to go right now, under, under the constitutional right to a speedy trial. So, not necessarily.
all of the BS story in excruciating detail. Because guess what? There's probably something disproving that I already know about. And I'm going to question him about that. And even if I don't know that something is or isn't a lie in his story, but I assume that it is a well-rehearsed one, I can just start asking him normal questions. What'd you have for breakfast today? What'd you do after that? Do you normally do that? Explain your car ride home to me. If you think an interview is just I tell one story the entire time and that's it, no. I'll give you an example. A real life example. Now, this didn't get charged because it ended up being a little weird. It was really weird. It was really, really weird.
Land of voodoo and hoodoo and all kind of weird shit.
I get a 911 call. Late at night, show up on scene. A young woman who's mentally challenged that stays with her parents for her care. She tells her parents that she had a relationship with her ex-father-in-law. Yeah, that had stayed at their house that night. Well, what happens is I go talk to that ex-father-in-law who was about to leave the state. What a coincidence. And I get different variations of a well-rehearsed story. One is, yeah, I went at the house, we all had some drinks, we smoked a little bit of weed, and then I went into her bedroom and I fell asleep on the bed next to her and she fell asleep on the foot of the floor. And I'm like, okay, is that it? Is that the whole story? It certainly is. Well-rehearsed. That's awesome. All right. Well, like, what'd you do when you went in her room? You didn't just, like, go in a room and not talk to her. Like, what happened in the room? Oh, yeah, I went in there, I just laid down. John, I know you didn't just lay down on the bed. Well, no, John's story's changed. I mean, there was more questions than that. I'm giving you a very boiled down version of this. But he's like, okay, cool. Well, I got a text message from her and she told me to come in the room. And we watched a little bit of TV and then I fell asleep in the corner and that was it. And I was like, all right, well, tell me more. I asked her, well, how close are you guys sitting? Did you guys like cuddle up and watch it? I mean, your family, whatever, And then that story changed into, well, she touched my junk, over my pants. And then I went to bed and fell asleep. Oh, okay. All right. Well, that changed a lot from the first version of the story. I asked more questions. He gives me another detailed version of the story. And finally, after about 3 or 4 or 5 iterations of the story, I finally get the entire thing that happened in the bedroom. And that is that he went in there, grabbed her hand, put it down his pants, and then ended up having sex with her. And then, well, there's more graphic details in that we really don't need to go over the internet. And then he went to sleep. And you want to know what I did for that interview? I didn't do nanny boo-boo because that would have made me look stupid. And it would have ruined the relationship that I would have had with this person that I'm interviewing. This guy isn't taking me seriously. How unprofessional. Why would I even continue talking to him?
Exactly.
What I did was listen and ask questions based on the information that he gave me. Even from his well-rehearsed story, obviously, I still had a couple questions and things that I needed him to help clarify. And guess what? He clarified it all the way into a full confession. No tricks.
Yep.
No nanny boo-boos. Conversation skills. Listening. Knowing when to ask a question and when he says something important to me that I should go, write that down. That's an interesting way of saying something. I want to have him explain exactly what that is he just said. Because if you tell me a story and I ask you, well, explain that little bit, I just don't understand it. Well, obviously you're going to explain it. Why wouldn't you? Unless you're hiding something.
Exactly.
I'll end with this. Be careful who you watch on the internet. Everybody's trying to sell you something.
Yes.
I'm trying to sell you shirts. Angry Cops, Party Police. They're fantastic, and you can buy them below. Best way to support the channel. So just be mindful. If you're watching a fraudster or somebody on the internet that's begging for clicks and asking for views and telling something that just doesn't seem right, so then you can put a thumbs up, a heart, or a comment below, be wary, because some of it's just a bunch of bullshit. Best way to support the channel is buy yourself a shirt. Like I said before, cheapest way is to leave a comment. Tell me what you think. I don't know much about Matthew Cox. I've seen him before in a couple of things. He seems like a fast talker. You know what I mean?
Exactly
the guy
right.
Who says a lot of words fast so that it kind of like overwhelms you and you just go, oh yeah, that sounds right.
The hallmark of a con man. That is like whenever you get these guys like with this guy that does these TikToks, he's talking. There's a reason why con men are associated with the adjective of being a fast talker. It's why one, it's kind of why, one is synonymous with the other, is you talk fast enough, you can maybe slip things by the person listening to you and based on your cadence, based upon your tone, based upon your facial expressions, maybe you can basically slip something by them and get them to agree with you like, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense. And you're basically bypassing their logical thought processes because you're basically steamrolling them with information. So you're going to overwhelm their logic centers and just get them to go, oh yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, because they said a whole bunch of stuff, intermixing stuff with does make sense and stuff that makes absolutely no fucking sense. But because they're talking so fast, your brain gets the average person's brain might get overloaded with information. And what happens when that occurs is your brain latches on to something that makes sense. Your brain has a natural inclination to seek out information that to you anyway is logical and makes sense. So they basically throw a whole bunch of shit at you and your brain latches on to the stuff like, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, I'll agree with that. And in the meantime, they've told you a whole bunch of bullshit layered in like lasagna layered in with something that could kind of make sense along with stuff that makes absolutely no sense. And they'll latch onto the stuff that does make sense. You go, oh yeah, everything this guy's saying is correct. That's how these con men, that's how these fast talkers are able to con people, basically.
Doesn't mean that that's bad. It could just mean he's a good storyteller. Let me know what you think of him. Are there any other weird things that he says? Maybe I'll do a series on Matthew. Maybe I'll have him come over.
Oh.
The Overserved podcast would love to interview a previous felon. See you next time, weirdos.
That was very interesting. I'd never heard of this guy that does these podcasts. Obviously, I knew about JD Delay. I've seen him on the Unsub Boys like once or twice. Like JD Delay, I know, I'm very familiar with him. He seems like a really good guy. Made some awful decisions in his life and actually has taken great strides into improving his life and getting back on the side of angels, so to speak. So yeah, it's absolutely.
Ember burns bright, brighter than